Is your HOA always this fair gate creek? The board lady turned my valve off and said it was for community standards. My crops died while she smiled behind sunglasses. I found the original permit paper stamp, red tape glow, signed by my grandfather, Judge Grayson Carter, who authorized their water rights decades ago. When the court replayed his clause, the gavel dropped and their permit was gone for good. Next week, the clubhouse stayed dark and the road was renamed Grayson Trail. Cole Carter stood at the end of his farm's gravel driveway staring at the freshly posted notice stuck to a telephone pole. His heart sank as he read the HOA's new rule. Farm trucks are prohibited from using this road during working hours. The road, which had served as the lifeblood of his farm, the one that connected his fields to the county road, now had a big no entry sign in front of it. Cole could hardly believe what he was reading. This was the latest in a series of restrictions being rolled out by the Clearbrook Meadows Homeowners Association. Clearbrook County had always been a haven for farmers like him. His farm, nestled in the outskirts of Clearbrook Meadows, had long thrived on its quiet access to the public roads. But now this new HOA rule threatened to cripple his livelihood. Without the ability to use this road, his trucks loaded with the hay cattle feed and equipment he used to keep his farm running couldn't reach their destination. The situation was dire, and Cole knew it. This wasn't just another inconvenience. It was a direct assault on his right to work his land. He could feel the weight of it settling and the pressure mounting on his shoulders. This was the tipping point. It was no longer just about a few rules about property maintenance. The HOA was now meddling in how he ran his farm. Foreshadowing the battle ahead. This rule was just the beginning. Cole had dealt with the HOA before ridiculous fines for a fence that was deemed too high and complaints about his barn's unattractive appearance. But this was different. The HOA wasn't just concerned with appearances or minor issues anymore. They were reaching into his business, into the core of what kept his family's farm alive. As he walked away from the pole, the weight of the decision hit him. This battle wasn't going to be over in a few weeks. This was a fight that was going to define him. His first instinct was to ignore it, to try to work around it as he had done with the previous nonsense. But this was too big. Too much was at stake. He had a choice to make. Either he would roll over, let the HOA dictate how he ran his life, or he would fight back. But fighting back meant getting serious, doing more than just writing angry letters or showing up at HOA meetings. It meant going to war. It meant reclaiming his rights. He could already feel the anger boiling inside him. This wasn't just a matter of inconvenience. It was an infringement on his freedom. The plan takes shape. Cole's goal became clear. He needed to find a way to keep his farm running without letting the HOA win. The simplest solution seemed to be to build a new road, one that wouldn't be subject to the HOA's whims. But that wouldn't be easy. The land was rough, full of hills and dense patches of trees. But he was determined. He had already started drawing up rough plans in his mind for a bypass, an alternative route that would bypass the HOA-controlled road and let his trucks get through. If the HOA wouldn't let him use the road, he would create his own. He had enough land, and he knew how to build. It was a matter of finding the right tools, the right materials, and the right resolve. The first blow. As Cole went about his day trying to make sense of what had just happened, he was interrupted by the sound of a distant truck engine. He turned toward the driveway and saw a large steel gate being unloaded. His blood ran cold as he realized what was happening. The HOA wasn't going to just stop at a rule. They were going to shut him out entirely. The gate was the first physical sign that they meant business, and as the workers set it up across his driveway, the message couldn't have been clearer. Cole Carter was no longer welcome on his own land. The gate was heavy, solid, and unyielding. It was the HOA's way of saying that they were in control. Microclimax, the moment of truth. Standing there, watching the workers tighten the bolts and lock the gate in place, Cole felt the full weight of what was happening. This wasn't just some petty disagreement. This was a war, and the HOA had just made the first move. He couldn't let them get away with it. The gate wasn't just a barrier to his farm, it was a challenge, a direct statement that his rights didn't matter. That was the moment that everything changed. He would not let this stand. He had spent years building his farm, and he wasn't about to watch it all be taken away by a group of people who had no understanding of the land, the community, or the way of life he was fighting for. Cliffhanger. The sound of the gate clanging shut reverberated in the still air, a deep, hollow thud that echoed through the quiet farm. Cole walked slowly toward the gate, his fists clenched at his sides. The road was now completely blocked. No trucks, no farm equipment, no deliveries. His access to the outside world was gone, and as he stood there staring at the cold metal barrier, a new resolve hardened inside him. He would build that new road no matter the cost. The HOA had drawn a line in the sand, and now so would he. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft light over the fields when Cole Carter grabbed his shovel and made his way to the back pasture of his farm. The steel gate still stood there stark and cold, a constant reminder of the HOA's control over his land. He couldn't wait any longer. His farm was at risk, his livelihood, his family's future, everything was on the line. The new rule, the gate and the endless red tape had forced his hand. If the HOA wouldn't let him use the road, he would build his own. He had spent sleepless nights thinking about how to bypass the gate, how to legally circumvent their control. But it wasn't just about the road. It was about his right to farm, to live without the overbearing hand of the HOA dictating every aspect of his life. He had no choice now but to act. Cole's muscles ached from the long hours of work as he made his way toward the overgrown path that led through his property. It had been years since this road had seen any traffic. It had once connected different parts of the farm, a lifeline to the surrounding land, but time had claimed it. The weeds were thick, the branches tangled, but Cole could see the faint outline of the road beneath it all. Clearing it wouldn't be easy, but it was his only shot. Ellie. His wife was already there working alongside him. She didn't say much, but Cole could tell she was worried. She always was, especially now. This wasn't just hard work, it was a battle that might tear them apart. But she stood by him as she always had. Together they'd built this farm from the ground up. Their sweat and sacrifices had created something they both cherished, and she wasn't about to let the HOA take it away. They spent the day clearing rocks and chopping away at the brush, but as much as they worked, it was clear they needed more help. That's where Lane came in. Lane had been a friend for years, someone Cole trusted completely. He was a retired construction worker, tough and steady, the kind of man who knew how to get things done. When Cole called him, Lane didn't hesitate. With Lane's help, the pace quickened. He had the tools, the experience, and the knowledge to turn this mess into something usable. While Lane focused on the technical work, Cole and Ellie tackled the more physical tasks, pulling up roots, clearing the underbrush. The road slowly began to take shape. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't be easy to use, but it was a start. As they dug deeper, they uncovered something unexpected, an old stack of papers buried beneath layers of dirt and debris. At first, Cole thought it was just more garbage, something the previous owners of the land had left behind. But as he flipped through the brittle pages, his heart began to race. These weren't just old receipts or forgotten notes. These were public easement documents. Cole's fingers trembled as he realized what he was holding. The road running through his land, the very path that had been blocked by the HOA's gate, was public land. It had been designated for public use, and according to the documents, the HOA had no jurisdiction over it. This discovery was a game-changer. If the road was public, then Cole had a right to use it. The HOA couldn't just come in and stop him. They had no legal authority to do so. For a moment, Cole just stood there, the papers in his hand, the weight of their significance sinking in. This was the break he had been hoping for, the leverage he needed to fight back. But even as hope surged in his chest, a new fear began to settle in. The HOA wasn't going to just accept this. If they thought installing the gate would be the end of it, they were wrong. They would fight back, probably with lawyers and threats, and Cole knew they wouldn't go down without a fight. The realization hit him hard. This battle was far from over. The roadblock was just the beginning. They would have to prepare for a legal battle, one that would cost time, money, and energy. But Cole wasn't about to back down. Not now, not with everything at stake. This was his fight, and he wasn't going to let anyone take his farm away from him. As the sun began to set, the task of clearing the road still far from complete, Cole stood with Ellie and Lane, their sweat-soaked bodies tired but determined. The documents were the proof they needed, the first step in their legal battle. The road wasn't just a road anymore. It was a symbol of their fight, a fight for their right to live and work on their own land. And no matter what the HOA threw at them, they were ready for the next step. The air inside Grace Holloway's office was thick with anticipation. The old wooden desk in the corner was piled with legal books, case files, and yellowing papers, all signs of the relentless work Grace had put into her career. She sat across from Cole, her hands clasped in front of her, a stern but thoughtful expression on her face. Beside him, Ellie remained silent, her worry still evident, though her presence was a quiet comfort. Grace had the sharp eyes of a seasoned lawyer, the kind of professional who had seen it all. Cole had always known the path to challenging the HOA wouldn't be easy, but after months of fighting on his own, he realized that it was time to bring in someone with real expertise. Grace wasn't just any lawyer. She was a force to be reckoned with, someone who'd taken on big corporations and powerful individuals in the past. Her reputation in Clearbrook County was one of unshakable resolve, and it was exactly what Cole needed to take on the HOA. "I've reviewed the documents you brought," Grace said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, measured. "You've done a lot of the groundwork already. These public easement documents are the key to our case, but we'll need more to make this a winning argument." She paused, eyeing Cole with a steady gaze. "This is going to be a long fight. The HOA has deep pockets and they won't back down easily." Cole nodded, his jaw tightening. He had expected nothing less. The stakes were high, and he couldn't afford to lose. His farm, his home, and everything he had worked for was on the line. Grace slid a stack of papers across the desk to him, each one carefully labeled with notes and references. "Here's what we need: the full property deeds for your land, an updated map of the easement, and any historical documents that show how the road has been used by the public. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case will be." Cole flipped through the papers, his mind racing. It was all coming together. For the first time, he felt a real sense of direction in this fight. Grace had a plan, and with her help, they could take this all the way to court. Ellie leaned forward, her eyes scanning the papers as well. "Do you really think we can win? I mean, the HOA is powerful. They've always been able to do what they want around here." Grace's lips curled into a small smile, not one of reassurance but of confidence. "The HOA has overreached. They've pushed too far and they're vulnerable. They think they can bully people like Cole into submission, but with the right legal strategy we can turn this around." She paused, giving both of them a long look. "But it won't be easy. We'll be fighting on two fronts, legally and emotionally. It's going to be a grind, but I believe we can make it." Her words hit home harder than Cole had expected. He had known that he couldn't back down, but hearing it from Grace, someone who had spent her life in courtrooms, reminded him just how much he had at stake. This wasn't just a fight for land. It was a fight for his right to live without fear, without constant surveillance, and without being dictated by a group of strangers who didn't understand his life. As Grace went over the next steps, explaining the specifics of the legal process and what they'd need from him, Cole found his resolve growing. The anger he'd been carrying inside, the frustration with the HOA, the fear of losing it all, it was starting to shift into something else: determination. He wasn't just fighting for his farm anymore. He was fighting for his dignity, for his family, for his freedom to live how he saw fit. Suddenly, Grace's tone shifted. She looked at him with intensity, as though preparing to make a critical point. "Cole, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The HOA isn't going to lay down and let us win. They'll retaliate and it could get ugly. But we have something they don't: the law. And the truth is on our side." Cole felt a surge of hope. This wasn't just about clearing a road. This was about standing up for what was right. Grace's words fired him up in a way that no amount of physical labor ever could. For the first time in weeks, he saw a clear path ahead, one that didn't involve retreat or submission. They had a real shot. Just as he started to feel a sense of control, a loud thud interrupted his thoughts. Grace's desk phone buzzed, and she picked it up with a resigned expression. A few moments later, she hung up, her eyes narrowing. That was the HOA's lawyer. "They're sending a letter. A chill ran down Cole's spine. He knew what that meant. The HOA wasn't going to let this go. Grace exhaled slowly. It's a threatening letter. They're ramping up their legal pressure. It's not just a warning, it's a declaration of war. The letter would likely be the first in a series of escalating legal threats, and Cole knew it was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The stakes had just been raised. The fight had gone from being about his farm to something much bigger. "Get ready," Grace said, standing up and gathering her papers. "We've got a long fight ahead, and it's only going to get harder from here. But you've got me, and I'm not backing down." As Cole and Ellie left Grace's office, the weight of the situation settled in. He could feel the tension, the pressure mounting. The HOA had made its move, and now it was his turn to push back harder. This wasn't just about a road anymore. It was about his life, his family, and his future, and he wasn't about to let anyone take that from him. The road to justice would be long, but Cole was ready to walk it no matter what. It started subtly. Just whispers in the local diner, then it grew louder, spilling into town hall meetings and beyond. Cole Carter, once a respected farmer in Clearbrook County, was now the target of the Homeowners Association's smear campaign. The message was clear: Cole was a danger to the community. He was being painted as an outsider, a reckless troublemaker, someone who would put everyone's property values and safety at risk. "Did you hear what the HOA's saying?" Ellie asked, her voice tight as they sat at their usual booth in the diner. "They're telling everyone that you're trying to ruin the whole neighborhood. They say your farm's a disaster waiting to happen." Cole didn't answer right away. He had expected something like this to happen. After all, the HOA had no interest in letting him win, not without a fight. But hearing it for the first time made his stomach tighten. He knew how dangerous this could be. If the community turned against him, the fight could be over before it even really began. "They've already started spreading lies," Ellie said, her voice low, but full of resolve. "If we don't act fast, the whole town will be against us." Cole didn't let the worry show on his face, but inside he was already thinking ahead. This wasn't just a matter of proving his right to the land anymore. This was about keeping his reputation intact and making sure the community saw the truth. He couldn't afford to let the HOA control the narrative. "I know," he said quietly, "but we've got the truth on our side. They can spread all the lies they want, but the people who matter will see through it." Ellie shot him a look, the one that always came before action. "We've got to fight back, though. If they're turning the town against you, we've got to give them something they can't ignore." Cole nodded, determination setting in. "We start with the people who know me, and we start getting the evidence we need to turn this around." Just then, a familiar face entered the diner, Marlene Buchanan, the president of the HOA. She stood by the counter talking to a few of the locals, making sure her accusations were spreading. As she glanced over at Cole and Ellie, she offered a smirk as though the smear campaign were some kind of victory. Cole met her gaze, the weight of her insincerity settling deep in his chest. He didn't just have to beat the HOA in court. He had to beat them in the hearts and minds of the people who still saw him as one of their own. As the days passed, Cole and Ellie worked tirelessly. They gathered documents, photos, and testimonials from neighbors who had lived alongside Cole for years, proving that the accusations about his farm were baseless. But the weight of the smear campaign was heavy, and the more Cole fought to clear his name, the more the HOA doubled down on their lies. The turning point came late one evening when Cole received an anonymous tip, a single envelope slipped under the door of his farmhouse. Inside, there were financial documents that painted the HOA in a new light. The papers revealed several discrepancies in the HOA's financial dealings, including misuse of funds, unapproved expenditures, and the mismanagement of community resources. The tipster, though anonymous, had made it clear that the HOA's leadership was using their power for personal gain. Ellie sat beside him as they sifted through the documents, both of them stunned by what they had found. This was the smoking gun they needed. If the HOA had been mismanaging funds, it could not only discredit their smear campaign, but also give Cole the ammunition he needed for the legal battle ahead. "This is it," Ellie whispered, her fingers trembling as she turned the page. "This could turn everything around. If we go public with this, it could destroy them." Cole looked at the papers, then back at Ellie. The anger and frustration he'd been carrying for months now turned into something else, something even more powerful. This was no longer just about the road or the farm. This was about exposing corruption, about fighting back against a group that thought it could control every aspect of his life. "Let's not waste any time," Cole set a new fire in his eyes. "We're going to make sure everyone knows what they're really about." The next day, Cole went to Grace Holloway's office with the documents in hand. The financial misconduct was the leverage they needed, the key to showing that the HOA wasn't just a nuisance, they were criminals. Grace took one look at the papers, her face unreadable. Then she smiled, but it wasn't the smile of someone who had just received a victory. It was the smile of someone who knew they had just turned the tide. "This is gold," she said. "It's exactly what we needed to tip the scales in our favor." Cole felt a sense of power he hadn't felt in weeks. The smear campaign that the HOA had launched wasn't just an attack on his reputation, it was an attack on everything the HOA had hidden behind their legal walls. Now the truth was coming out. But as they prepared to take the fight to the HOA, Cole knew the battle wasn't over. The next move would come from them, and he had no idea how far they would go to protect their secrets. The HOA had underestimated him before, but now with this new weapon in hand they would learn just how far Cole was willing to go to reclaim his rights. The first piece of evidence had come to light, and with it the battle was about to take a turn Cole never could have anticipated. Cole never imagined that a simple video could change everything. What started as a quiet protest against the HOA's control over his land had quickly snowballed into a public spectacle. It all began when Ellie, frustrated by the HOA's installation of the steel gate blocking the only road to Cole's farm, decided to grab her phone. The gate, a cold, unyielding symbol of their power, was captured in a short video. She shared it with her friends, thinking little of it, just another way to vent her frustration. But something remarkable happened. The video quickly gained traction. Within hours, the footage of the steel gate went viral. It wasn't just local. It spread far beyond Clearbrook County. What was once a personal fight for Cole's farm was now a rallying cry for people who believed in his cause. The video's message was simple. An ordinary man fighting an unjust system had been backed into a corner, and the community had noticed. "Look at this," Cole Ellie said, sitting beside him as the video replayed on his screen. "This is everywhere. People are actually talking about it." Cole couldn't believe it. His farm, once a peaceful place tucked away from the world, was now the center of a storm. The comments poured in, many offering their support. Some expressed outrage at the HOA's blatant overreach. Others, however, were more cautious, worried about how this would escalate. The news outlets picked up the story. The local paper ran a headline calling it "David versus Goliath, Farmer versus HOA." A local news station even broadcast a segment about the fight, framing it as an underdog story. The message was clear. Cole had become a symbol for anyone who had ever felt powerless against a system that didn't care. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. With each new share, Cole felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The attention was overwhelming. What had been a personal battle to preserve his livelihood had turned into a public spectacle. Now, it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the larger fight for justice, and the media was watching. One evening, as Cole sat at the kitchen table, his phone buzzed. It was a call from Grace Holloway, his lawyer. Grace said, her voice serious. "You're going to get a lot of attention now. The media's not going to let this go, and neither is the HOA. They're going to respond." "I know," Cole replied, running a hand through his hair, "but I can't back down now. Not after everything that's happened." Grace was silent for a moment, then spoke again, her tone more supportive. "You've got the community on your side. We just need to keep it focused. Get the truth out there and let them see that the HOA isn't the righteous party here." The next day, the situation took a dramatic turn. A local TV station reached out asking for an interview. They wanted Cole's side of the story. It was a chance to speak directly to the public, to clear his name and make sure the community understood what was really at stake. Cole agreed, though he could feel the weight of the decision. A TV appearance meant the world was watching him, and the stakes were higher than ever. The interview aired that evening, and Cole was ready. Standing in front of the camera, he spoke calmly, but with purpose. He described the situation at his farm, the damage caused by the steel gate, and the undeniable truth that the HOA's actions were illegal. The camera zoomed in on his face, capturing every ounce of frustration and determination. It wasn't just about a road anymore. It was about standing up for what was right. The interview was a turning point. The video, the interview, the articles, they all worked in Cole's favor. The support from the community was overwhelming, and soon more businesses, farmers, and citizens were offering their support. Some sent donations to cover legal fees. Others simply posted their support on social media. People from all walks of life began sharing their own stories of struggling against faceless bureaucracies. It was clear Cole was no longer alone. But the HOA wasn't about to let things slide. Marlene Buchanan, the president of the HOA, made a public statement in response, trying to justify the HOA's actions. Her words did little to win back public favor. In fact, the more she spoke, the more she alienated the very people who had once supported her. Then the HOA escalated. They hired a PR firm to combat the negative publicity and discredit Cole. The PR team worked overtime, crafting statements that painted Cole as a troublemaker, someone who was trying to circumvent the rules for personal gain. They tried to turn the tide, but it was clear they were losing. The media had already latched on to the story, and Cole's supporters weren't backing down. Cole received a call from Grace shortly after the PR campaign began. "They're going to do whatever it takes to smear you. They'll try to make you look like the villain," Grace warned. "But we've got the truth on our side." Cole clenched his fists, the anger bubbling up inside him. "I won't let them win. Not this time." The stakes had never been higher. The fight was no longer just about a road or a gate, it was about something much larger. The HOA had forced his hand, and now, with the media watching, Cole was ready to show the world that he wouldn't back down. The battle had only just begun, but Cole knew one thing for certain: the more the HOA pushed, the more he would push back. The Clearbrook Meadows clubhouse was filled with the usual crowd of residents, but today the atmosphere was different. The tension in the air was palpable as the HOA's annual meeting commenced. Cole Carter, standing at the back of the room with Ellie and Grace by his side, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Today wasn't just any meeting. It was his chance to confront Marlene Buchanan and the rest of the HOA board face to face to expose their corruption and defend his right to his own land. For weeks, Cole had been preparing for this moment. The video of the steel gate had gone viral, and the public had rallied behind him. But now, this was the battle that would determine the future. Armed with legal evidence, including documents that proved the HOA's financial misconduct, Cole was ready. But he couldn't afford to let his anger cloud his judgment. This needed to be more than just a protest. He had to win over the community, and that meant staying composed no matter what. Marlene Buchanan, the president of the HOA, sat at the front of the room with the other board members. She wore a cold, calculating smile as the meeting began. Her eyes flicked over to Cole as he made his way toward the microphone, and the tension between them was immediate. She knew what he was there to do, and she wasn't going to make it easy for him. "Good evening." Cole began, his voice steady but firm, echoing through the room. "I'm here tonight, not just as a farmer, but as a resident of this community. I've been fighting for my right to access my property, and I've come here to share the truth." As he spoke, he could feel all eyes on him. The murmurs of the crowd grew quieter, and for a moment Cole wondered if he might have already lost them. But he pressed on, flipping open the folder that contained the documents he'd gathered. "First, I want to address the issue of the steel gate," Cole said, pointing to a large photo of the gate on the screen behind him. "This gate was installed to block my only access road. You've restricted my ability to run my farm. But what you may not know is that part of this road, according to public land documents, is actually open for public use." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The room was filled with shocked faces, many of whom had no idea that Cole had this evidence. Marlene shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but she quickly regained her composure. "You can't just come in here and accuse the HOA of overstepping its bounds," Marlene said, her voice dripping with disdain. "We are simply enforcing the rules that have been in place for the benefit of everyone in Clearbrook Meadows." Grace Holloway Cole's lawyer and mentor stood up, taking a step forward. Her presence was calm but authoritative. "Actually, Marlene, the documents Cole is presenting are clear. The road in question is a public easement. Your actions, including the installation of that gate, are a violation of not only Cole's rights but of the community's as well." Marlene's face reddened as she tried to deflect. "This is an exaggeration. The HOA has every right to maintain the integrity of this neighborhood. Cole is simply using this as an excuse to avoid the rules." But Grace wasn't backing down. "The rules were not meant to harm residents, Marlene. They were meant to ensure safety, not to obstruct the livelihoods of hard-working farmers." She gestured to the documents on the screen. "And these documents show clear financial misconduct within the HOA that calls into question your motives." The room went quiet as the papers detailing improper financial dealings within the HOA were projected for everyone to see. Cole's heart pounded in his chest, but he held his ground. The audience, now fully engaged, began to murmur again. Some seemed skeptical, others outraged. The seed of doubt had been planted. Marlene tried to remain composed, but Cole could see the cracks starting to show. A few of the residents who had once sided with the HOA were now whispering amongst themselves, glancing nervously at each other. Cole could see that the tide was starting to turn, and it gave him a surge of hope. He wasn't just fighting for his farm anymore. He was fighting for everyone who had been ignored or manipulated by the HOA. And then, just as Marlene opened her mouth to argue again, a surprising shift occurred. One of the HOA's board members, a longtime ally of Marlene, stood up. His face was pale and his hands shook slightly as he cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, his voice hesitant. "I've been reviewing these documents, and I think we need to take a closer look at what's really going on here. Maybe we've missed something." The words hit the room like a bombshell. The audience was stunned into silence as the board member's words hung in the air. Marlene's expression darkened and she shot him a cold, warning look. But the damage was done. The cracks in the HOA's unity were beginning to widen. With the pressure mounting, Cole pressed on. "I'm not here to make accusations without proof. I'm here because I believe in the right to be heard. The HOA is not above the law, and it's time we all start standing up for what's right." The room erupted into quiet applause from the crowd. The support was overwhelming. Cole knew he still had a long way to go, but tonight was a victory. The tide was turning, and the HOA's stronghold on Clearbrook Meadows was beginning to slip. The courthouse loomed ahead, its columns washed in pale morning light. Cole Carter stood at the steps for a moment, feeling the weight of the months that had led him here. Every sleepless night, every fight, every insult from the HOA, all of it had brought him to this point. Today wasn't just about his land anymore. It was about justice. About proving that one man armed with truth and perseverance could stand up to power and win. Grace Holloway, sharp as ever in her gray suit, walked beside him, clutching a stack of neatly organized files. "You've done everything right, Cole," she said, her tone measured but reassuring. "We have the evidence, the testimony, and the law on our side. Now we just need to let the facts speak for themselves." Cole nodded, his eyes steady. "They've taken enough from me, Grace. It's time they answer for it." Ellie, standing behind them, gave his arm a gentle squeeze. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "you've already won in my eyes." Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. The HOA's lawyers sat at the opposite table, 3 of them all dressed in dark suits, whispering among themselves. Marlene Buchanan was there too, sitting stiffly, her expression unreadable. She had traded her usual arrogance for something colder, more defensive. The public support behind Cole had shaken her confidence, and now, under the harsh lights of the courtroom, she looked smaller than ever. The judge entered, and everyone stood. The room fell silent as the proceedings began. Grace rose first, addressing the court with calm authority. "Your Honor, today, we are here because a homeowner was unlawfully deprived of access to his own land. The defendant, the Clearbrook Meadows Homeowners Association, abused its authority, acted outside its jurisdiction, and inflicted real financial and emotional harm on my client, Mr. Cole Carter." The HOA's lead attorney countered immediately. "Your Honor, the HOA acted within its rights to maintain community safety and property values. Mr. Carter was repeatedly notified of the violations. Grace interrupted, her voice firm. Violations that don't exist under county or state law. The HOA invented regulations that contradict public easement rights. And she said, holding up a document, they funded these actions through misappropriated community funds. A murmur spread through the courtroom as Grace handed the document to the clerk. Cole recognized it immediately. It was the financial record, the same one that had been anonymously delivered to him weeks ago. The numbers didn't lie. The HOA had been diverting funds meant for community maintenance into personal expenses, including the installation of the gate that had sparked this entire battle. The judge examined the papers, his brow furrowed. "These are serious allegations, Counselor," he said. "They're more than allegations," Grace replied. "They're proof." As the evidence piled up, maps, photographs, the public easement records, Cole watched the HOA's defense crumble. Grace moved through each piece of evidence with precision, dismantling every argument the HOA's attorneys tried to make. The board members shifted uncomfortably, their earlier confidence fading with each passing minute. When the time came for closing arguments, Grace stood tall, her tone controlled but fierce. "This case is about more than a road, Your Honor. It's about accountability. It's about a community organization that forgot who it was meant to serve. My client didn't break the law, he stood up to it. And when faced with intimidation, humiliation, and financial loss, he chose the only weapon he had left, the truth." Her words echoed in the courtroom. Even Cole, who had spent weeks hearing every detail of their case, felt something stir inside him. It wasn't just pride, it was relief. For the first time, someone was speaking the truth aloud in a place where it mattered most. The HOA's attorney tried to recover, but their arguments now felt hollow. Marlene sat frozen, her hands clasped tightly as if she already knew how this would end. Grace's logic was airtight, her delivery flawless. It wasn't anger that carried her words, it was conviction. When the judge finally spoke, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "This court has reviewed the evidence presented today," he said slowly, "and it appears there are legitimate grounds to question the legality of the HOA's actions. A full review of their authority and financial practices will proceed before final judgment." It wasn't a verdict yet, but it was as close to a victory as Cole could have hoped for. The implication was clear, the judge believed them. Cole turned to Grace, a faint, disbelieving smile forming on his lips. "Did we just—" She nodded, allowing herself a rare grin. "We did more than that. We turned the tide." As they left the courtroom, flashes from news cameras greeted them outside. The same public that had watched the steel gate go viral was now waiting for the next chapter. Cole paused on the courthouse steps, looking out at the crowd. He felt something he hadn't felt in months, hope. Behind him, Grace adjusted her files and whispered, "This isn't the end, Cole, but it's the beginning of something better. You've shown them what happens when someone finally fights back." Cole looked up at the courthouse flag fluttering in the wind, and for the first time since the battle began, he allowed himself to believe that justice was finally within reach. The dawn broke clear and golden over Clearbrook County, the light spilling over the long stretch of gravel that led to Cole Carter's farm. For the first time in nearly a year, the road stood open. The steel gate, the symbol of the HOA's power and arrogance, was gone. Its bolts lay scattered in the dirt, the last traces of a fight that had finally ended in justice. A week earlier, Judge Harlan had read his ruling aloud in a packed courtroom. The HOA had acted unlawfully, its restrictions invalid, its finances mismanaged, and its leadership corrupt. The verdict was firm. The gate must be removed, the misused funds repaid, and the public easement restored. When the gavel fell, a wave of emotion swept through Cole so strong that he had to sit down. He had won, not through shouting or anger, but through persistence, truth, and the law. Now, standing on the edge of his land, Cole felt a quiet pride that words couldn't capture. The sound of tools echoed down the road as workers loosened the last of the rusted bolts. Every clank was like a note of freedom. Ellie Carter stood beside him, arms crossed against the wind, her smile small but full of meaning. "It's really over," she said softly. Cole nodded. Over and done right. Grace Holloway, The woman who had fought by his side through every legal blow walked up holding a clipboard. "The court order's been filed with the county." She said, a faint grin tugging at her lips. "The HOA has 30 days to repay what they took." "You did it, Cole." He looked at her eyes heavy with gratitude. "We did it," he said. "You, Emmy, Ellie. And everyone who didn't give up." Across the road, a few neighbors had gathered to watch the removal. Some of them had once avoided eye contact with him at the diner, afraid to take sides. But now they stood clapping as the final section of the gate came free and dropped to the ground with a satisfying crash. A cheer rose from the crowd, echoing across the fields. Cole took a slow breath. Finally, someone fought back. One of the older farmers said, voice thick with pride. The words lingered in the air, simple but perfect. Grace smiled at that. "Looks like your story struck a nerve," she said. "You reminded folks that rules only work when they're fair." A few of the HOA's former board members stood off to the side, silent and pale. Marlene Buchanan, once so smug and untouchable, was nowhere to be seen. Her resignation had been filed the day after the ruling. The community she had ruled through fear was already changing without her. Cole walked up to the now clear entrance of his property. For months, this space had been a wound cold steel dividing him from his own land. Now it was open sky sunlight and freedom. He brushed his hand against the wooden post where the gate's hinges had once been and exhaled. Ellie placed a hand on his shoulder. "Drive it," she said. "The way it's meant to be." He smiled, climbed into his old truck, and started the engine. The familiar rumble filled the air, and for a moment it felt like coming home after a long exile. As he pressed the gas, the tires rolled across the open threshold, dust rising behind him like smoke after battle. Grace and the others watched from the road as Cole's truck disappeared down the path, his figure framed by the golden light. When he reached the end of the stretch, he stopped, stepped out, and turned to look back at what had once been the symbol of his struggle. The road shimmered in the late morning sun, wide and free. Later that day, the county workers arrived to install a new sign. Grace handed Cole the cover cloth and nodded for him to do the honors. He pulled it away, revealing the gleaming words, Grayson Trail, named after his late father, the man who had first cleared the dirt path decades earlier. A murmur ran through the crowd, followed by applause. Ellie squeezed his hand, tears shining in her eyes. "He'd be proud," she whispered. Cole looked at the sign, his chest tightening. "He taught me that a man's word means something," he said quietly. "Guess we just proved it still does." As the sun dipped low, the crowd began to drift away, leaving Cole, Ellie, and Grace standing alone at the road's entrance. The air smelled of pine and fresh gravel. The open stretch of Grayson Trail stretched before them, glowing gold in the fading light. Grace turned to him. "You've set a precedent, you know. People will remember this." Cole smiled faintly. "I don't want to be remembered," he said. "I just want to live free." He climbed back into his truck, the sound of the engine fading into the distance. The road behind him was clear. The fight was over. Justice, earned the hard way, was his at last. The sun glinted off the new bronze plaque at the edge of Grayson Trail, the county seal pressed clean into its surface. I ran my hand across it, feeling the weight of what it meant. Freedom earned the hard way. The gate was gone, the road open, and for once the silence wasn't heavy. The neighbors gathered as a county official read the posted order, marking the end of a long fight and the start of something fairer. I learned that justice isn't loud. It's steady. Finally, someone fought back. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.